Hanging Out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
And today we are hanging out with ANC veteran Mavuso Msimang. I said to you earlier on that he is like one of the few last remaining voices of reason, honestly. Very rational, very measured. And I think we're really blessed to still have people like him with us who can counsel even the movement that he comes from, but who can help us also sometimes when we are caught in this crazy world, help us make sense of it. And we are hanging out with him today to get to know him better. So, Mr. Msimang, thank you so much for making time for us. Or should I say Dr. Msimang?
No, Mr. Works very well.
How are you?
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very good.
Yeah.
But I hope you'll be around to protect me after all the things you say.
I will be. But I'll also be around to criticize you because you know I do.
You're most welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate it. I want to start off with a light question that I've been asking listeners this morning because today is International Day of Happiness. And I've been asking listeners, when was the last time were you happy? Do you remember the last time you were filled with your heart was just smiling? Could be recently, could be a long time ago.
Well, very recently, which was last Sunday, I was actually delighted to be with my grandchildren at my daughter's party. I mean, just not just the event, the people who came around there, people I hadn't seen in a very, very long time. And there was jubilation, there was joy, there was excitement, and we did talk a little bit about things gone by. So that was a moment of excitement.
That's so great. I always feel like grandparents love their grandchildren more than their daughters and sons love their own children. I think grandparents, you guys are really obsessed with your grandchildren. Like the love you give them, the way you spoil them is just incredible.
I love my grandchildren. Yeah. We never argue with them, so that's a good start.
Yeah.
And their innocence, they are what they are.
Yeah.
I've got a little boy who likes to style himself after me. He's called Mavuso too, and he really thinks the world starts and ends with him. So to see him dressed up.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 5 years now.
Yeah.
He really thinks the world of himself. To see him doing that without being bashful, without being polite, it comes naturally.
I love that. I just love seeing them just become, that innocence and just them experiencing this world and making sense of it and becoming these personalities and these characters. When you enjoy a relationship like that with your grandchildren, even with your own children, do you ever go back to how it was interrupted, especially during the apartheid years? Because as veterans, there's a lot that you had to sacrifice, spending a lot of time with your family, being away from the kids, because maybe you're in exile, because you're working with Oliver Tambo, whatever the scenario was for you. Were there moments where you were away from family a lot?
Oh, I was away from family a heck of a lot. When I left this country in 1963. I think, as I say in my little bio somewhere, I was supposed to have gone to school because the police wanted... I was in their crosshairs at Fort Hare, and I was advised to leave and complete my studies abroad. But then I get to Francistown, and every important person in the ANC is arrested, and I thought, well, who is going to fight for us? So I joined and changed. So from that time on, I think from the very time I left the country, it was clear that there will be no coming back. But we were young. And we really were focused on achieving this revolution, which, I think naively thought would happen in 5 years or something like that. And so you did think about them, but really we were so focused on what we were trying to do, we didn't want to take photographs, because who are you taking these pictures for? You're not allowed to do that, not that we did it. There was no correspondence with people at home. It was really a cutoff. So I do miss those times. When we came back, I met people some of whom were really kids, already having their own kids. This is 31 years later. So there is a gap which one feels, but you've got to move on.
Yeah.
That's what you have.
So you went to so many, I think it's several countries. There was a time you spent time in Moscow.
Yes.
And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, you underwent military training there on urban guerrilla warfare. What is urban guerrilla warfare? What does that even mean?
Well, guerrilla warfare is distinguished from conventional, in the sense that in conventional you are either in the infantry, artillery, or those kinds of formations, and you are in large numbers. A guerrilla has to survive. You've got to be fleet of foot and move from place to place and get as much of what you want from the enemy, if you can. You are taught how to you are taught how to manufacture explosives, and we didn't have access to TNT, which is a ready-made explosive base. So we needed to know what chemicals, like fertilizers, like nails thrown into fertilizer, would be effective in your operation. So and you needed to understand the topography of the place where you are.
Yeah.
Well, what are the enemy movements? What are the features of the place, and all of those things? But the real distinction is that you don't stand up and drill and march, and I still don't know how to do that now. But you just learn things that assist you in surviving, and
I feel like I'm sitting with like a James Bond here, like someone who... Do you still remember how to do those things, like how to manufacture a bomb?
Yeah,
From scratch?
If you gave me some ingredients, I would be able to do it. I wouldn't.
That's so fascinating. I mean, we see this in the movies, right? And I've never, honestly, even when I see it in the movies, and I love action movies, I always think, this is just, this is just film. There's no way that people can do that and put stuff together like that and just create a bomb. So it's so fascinating that that's something you guys can do.
It's something that ought to be used to defend yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's very risky to just play around with those things in the public and so on. It's meant to deter the enemy. It's meant to destroy the enemy. You need things like sulfuric acid to put and some device that you pour your sulfuric acid, for instance, onto this device that's explosive, which you talk about, but it must not fall onto it. It must give you enough time to run.
Yeah, let's not give people too many details for them to sit at home and make it. That's so fascinating. I find that so fascinating. What are your reflections? Tomorrow is Human Rights Day.
Yes.
And every time I have conversations with veterans, I'm just always filled with so much appreciation of the sacrifices that were made, because I just feel like there was a different kind of spirit back then, because a lot of young people felt a commitment to free this country. So they didn't put themselves first. They were not selfish enough to think, I'm okay, I'm just gonna go by. There were a lot of people who felt a commitment and a need to do something to save this country. And I wonder what your reflections are on even the rights that we enjoy, that you contributed in fighting for, so that all of us are equal in this country. I was speaking this morning to learners at St. Peter's College, and I was telling them that we need to be so appreciative of our rights. And I don't think we are. I think we've gotten to a state where we think the life we enjoy is normal. Like it's, oh yeah, this is just normal. We don't know that people died and sacrificed a lot for us to be able to enjoy these rights we take for granted. Do you actually think there's an appreciation, especially from us young people, of what people sacrificed for us to enjoy this democracy, as imperfect as it is?
Well, it's easy to blame young people, and quite honestly, I think part of the ignorance is a consequence of our not telling this story, communicating this story, not by way of boasting, because there are certain, if they had been there, the youth of today had been us, I think they would have reacted exactly like us.
They would have gone to Moscow
to whichever place. You see,
yeah.
You see, racism was raw. It told you cannot be a Clement Manyathela in a studio that belongs to white people. You can't go to that university. You can't go to that shop. Can't go to the. The challenge was really more immediate, and it infuriated you that you couldn't do certain things. So I think it was easier to react to that, even as it required some courage to do that, because the risks were very high, not on you, but also family. But the challenge is different from today's challenge, where you have the freedom that we are entitled to as a human being. And so you've got to, the challenges that you face have to do with how to look after your health, how to look after, you're faced with unemployment. It's a real issue which people address themselves to. So I'm saying for them to be appreciating that they can vote, they can go to any university. Well, it's normal for them. So there's nothing much to appreciate. But if the story had been told, of course, I think there would be a better understanding.
Yeah. And how do you deal with, because if you've been part of that system, you have to really be a forgiving person, and for you to live in a democracy where there are sometimes constant triggers. I don't know how you guys have dealt with it. Like, you chose, and this was, I think, a good decision to say, we believe in a non-racial society. We're not going to choose a revolution. We are choosing to sit down and have a conversation on how we build a country where black and white people will coexist equally. But when you have been treated like a second-class citizen, when you were not allowed to be on the same bus, when you were not allowed to sit on the same chair, when you were denied of opportunities that your white counterparts were given, how did you bring yourself to say, yeah, sure, it happens, but we're here now and we move on?
Well, the truth is that we did not choose to just negotiate and talk to these guys. When the ANC was banned in 1960, there was no alternative. It was either going to die or continue to exist in some other form. And the other form was illegally underground and taking up arms and fighting. So it wasn't easy for a South African group wanting to overthrow the government through the force of arms, because apartheid had also made absolutely certain that black people were not in the army. So that's why in the end so many people had to go to exile to learn how to fight and so on. But what defeated this government, the apartheid government, was a combination of a lot of pressure, eventually internationally. It was the action that was taken by the people who were in South Africa. There came a time, UDF, and those organizations started refusing to obey the government. They were defiant, and you had these hippos in all townships that were considered. So the decision to talk is forced by the fact that the government was in crisis because of the armed resistance, because of the internal resistance, absolutely uncontainable, but also the international pressure which boycotted these rugby things of their sports, cultural boycotts, economic boycotts. They always had the advantage of being favored by the Western governments that did keep them going for quite some time. But there came a time when they had to accept that the crisis is such that they cannot continue. At that point, then CODESA and those talks came into existence.
How did you forgive, though, as an individual? Because there's a position that the movement can take or the government, but as a person who experienced apartheid, as a person who experienced that discrimination on the basis of your color, how did you bring yourself to actually just forgive and say, we were treated bad, but it's okay, we're here now, and we move on?
Because you don't want to go to the level of these people, down there in the basement. You were fighting for human values. The Freedom Charter spelled this thing out 1955, long before 1994, that the South Africa that we desire is one which recognizes all human beings as equal with the same rights and so on. So I don't know. We had white people, not many, among our ranks. So one got to understand that this thing is about exploitation. It is racism, but you want to put in its place something that is humane, and you can't be sidetracked by racists and their racism. You see, a reverse racism would pull us back, actually. I agree with empowerment, absolutely. You have to, when you keep people out of, or the orbit of development and politics for three centuries, you've got to give them the opportunity to come up. And so affirmative action or empowerment was essential. I think it still is today. The problem has been the way it has been implemented by and large. So I don't see a white person until they start acting stupidly, and they do act very stupidly, unfortunately.
Human.
Yeah. But now, with all these things that are taking place, Trump telling people that people who own so much of South African land, when there are so few, that they are being persecuted by laws that are created, that irritates.
Where do you think that takes us? Because what is painful is that, in fact, what is also good, I think, for me is there are certain people who are now showing their true colors. So now we can really see that not every single person in this country is committed to the ideals of this democracy and of this constitution. That's why they were marching in Pretoria to thank Trump, and they were waving the old apartheid flag. They were saying, make South Africa great again. And to them, that means back there, they've got nostalgia about the apartheid days when they were superior and black people were inferior. Where do you think that places us? Because, sure, I mean, you can criticize Donald Trump as much as you want, but he has done something that has really divided us along racial lines. So what do we do, and how do we even respond to something like that as a society?
This is really a challenge to black people, I'll say that explicitly, and also to people who appreciate democracy and human rights. But black people remain, 30 years on, the underdog in all spheres of development, except politics. I think it's this action of these racists, AfriForum and others, should really be rebutted very strongly. We should be uniting now. It's a pity that my organization kind of got tainted by certain things. This would be the time when we need to move with determination and make sure that people get the economic rights that they've been denied. Just forget the nonsense or defy the nonsense and make sure that those expropriation bills are implemented because they are sound and they should happen. The anger of the people is that it hasn't happened. I don't know how much of... I've seen also white people saying these guys don't represent their feelings.
True. Yeah.
We welcome that, but we should act with resolve to correct the imbalances of centuries that we still haven't been able to address.
When we try to do that, Donald Trump responds, for instance, in the US, and I'm interested in how you think government can approach the scenario like that, because I don't know how you reason with someone like that. I really don't, who makes decisions based on disinformation and fake news, who just announces things on Twitter. He's the president of the US. He was democratically elected. He's taking decisions that have an impact, yes, on us and possibly on our government and our businesses. If AGOA is taken away, for instance, he's now expelled the ambassador, our ambassador to the US. What do you think is the right way to respond? Because even when you sit down with him, what are you negotiating? Because he's going to say to you, withdraw the ICJ case. He doesn't respect sovereignty. So what do? Do you even sit down and talk to someone like that? And if you don't, there are also consequences to that.
Well, we should have foreseen this, to be honest with you. Talking about AGOA with its spatial concessions for goods and services from South Africa, and started looking at alternatives. There are other area markets in the world which would consume these things that we take to the Americans. It takes planning, of course, and in the short term, I don't want to lie, we will feel these things, the consequences, if they've been giving money for HIV infected people. But we dare not compromise on issues of principle. How, when you see every day, you don't need to be told by a propagandist what happens in Palestine. I really don't want to jump into that. If they say they are angry because South Africa took them to the ICJ, we should be mobilizing more people to back us up, because that's the right thing to do. You're not going to appease the beast. You never will be able to do that. Milton talks about being a prince in hell, than a servant, in some heaven that you don't understand.
Do you think because now we have to send envoys there. We have to negotiate with them. Some people are arguing, don't even do that, because you are negotiating with people who are so hostile that they're not interested. There's nothing you're ever going to say that's going to change President Donald Trump's mind, or his advisors, or his senior officials. So what do?
We should not act, they are acting like this. We should not respond impulsively. I think it is important to send a delegation, apologize for nothing wrong, for no wrong that you have not committed. I think it's important in the short term that you, and for a long time too, that you use diplomacy to make sure that these things work, as long as you do not sacrifice your principles. If they say, we are going to be friends with you if you withdraw your this, that, and the other, and the nonsense they are talking about expropriating white people's land, I think they need to be told that that's nonsense. But we do need America, let's face it, definitely in the short term. But I think we should, independence, neutrality, what is it called, non-alignment, actually means you can't be a servant to the United States and take their dictates simply because they give you AGOA and other things. No, we are putting ourselves into a trap that we never should be going into.
Yeah, I mean, there are things we disagree with the U.S. Their foreign policy. They have taken foreign policy decisions that were devastating. And yet, we don't go, we're not talking to these guys. You respect that they're a sovereign country. They take decisions. They should offer us the same courtesy.
I wonder, sometimes they say the Constitution, South African, is one of the best in the world. When things that are being done by Trump seem to go, they're not unchallenged, but with such ease in America, I wonder whether it is the weakness, deficiencies in the American Constitution that allows a person to actually break the law at will. But again, there has been a time when justices who are elected, chosen politically, when they argued that a sitting president cannot be incriminated You know, that's what they said to excuse the Trump nonsense the first time around. Well, so right now he will do things with impunity because they have actually said any mistake that you make or any wrong you commit as a president is not punishable by law.
Yeah.
What kind of constitution is that? What kind of Supreme Court is chosen by politicians? If it's Democrats, it's a certain kind of justice. If it's Republicans, it's another set of people who will look at it differently. I think even though we have problems with our justice system, it's much better, it's much firmer. I don't think Trump would have been able to do what he's doing in America, in South Africa.
Absolutely. That takes us to 10:32.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
22 minutes before 11 o'clock on our Hanging Out feature this morning, we've got Mr. Mavuso Msimang, an ANC veteran, and I see some of your questions that have come through. I'll get to them in a moment. Your calls as well on 011-883-0702. But before I get there, let's play one of his favorite songs by Liz Wright. Tell me more about the song, Mr. Mavuso. Seems I'm Never Tired of Loving You. Why is this one of your favorite songs?
Well, the melody is just great. And in fact, I was hoping to find one where she's with Gregory Peck. They sing a similar song. I love it not for sentimental reason, but for the melody. And it's just one of those things that remind me of how music used to be in the olden days before the new one came into existence.
Are you a musical person? You sound like you can sing.
In exile, when we were waiting to come back, we lived, of course, for years eventually. I was part of a group that sang. We had formations, and in the evenings in the camp, we would then have little concerts. And I have more than a radio voice. Huh?
You do. That's fascinating. All right, here's Liz Wright. Seems I'm never tired of loving you.
Good morning, man, to you and Mr. Msimang there. Flores here from the Western Cape. I would just like to know whether he are happy with his decision to return to the ANC, and has there been any improvement, especially things that he did not agree with? Does he think that there has been work done ever since his return? Have a good job. Bye-bye.
Hi, Clement. Will you please ask our veteran there, what does he make regarding the renewal agenda of the African National Congress? Are they applying it correctly? Are they benefiting from it? Or is ANC benefiting from it? Because from where I am seated, we have suggestion on how this can be carried out to the benefit of African National Congress, but we don't know where to go. Sija in Pretoria.
Hi, Clement. This is Bongani in Tembisa here. Can I ask the gentleman there, what is the biggest difficulty are they finding in introducing a new currency like BRICS currency to tackle the US, or just an African currency that all African countries, they can unite in a single banner to fight against these sanctions that the West are bringing in African countries and the Middle East countries, that we can fight back? What is the biggest difficulty are they finding to introduce a new currency that we can fight against the US dollar, the pound, and the euro? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for those questions. So let's start with the first question about, are you happy? You had resigned from the ANC and you came back. Are you happy with that decision of coming back?
Now, thank you very much. It's so interesting how people reacted to my resignation, about which very, very were excited. I think our ANC has troubled people quite a bit. And then quite a few of them, or very many of them, were very disappointed that I went back.
Yeah.
Give me the opportunity to explain again.
Yeah.
I had actually hoped that the letter that I wrote, which is now very public, would be attended to by the Secretary General, who would say, please come, let's have a discussion. What is this all about? But unfortunately, before I knew what was going on, it had been leaked to the media.
Who leaked it?
It would be from his office. I don't know who there. I don't think it's he himself. Yeah. So then I had to react in a very different way. But yeah, now leaving the ANC, the veterans actually came on very strongly to me. I respect the group of veterans that are in the league right now. And they said, guys, you're popular now. You know, everybody's talking about you. You're trending and so on. But do you think you'll be more effective in fighting against the corruption that the Veterans League platform gives you? Come on, it's almost like a desertion. So it's not as if I was asked by the president or anybody senior there. It's the veterans who did say, listen, guys, let's come back. The struggle continues. There is a little gap with your little plank on this platform. The fight is here.
Did the president not call you, though?
No, he didn't call me. Yeah.
Okay.
No, he didn't
Are
call
you
me.
happy?
He welcomed my coming back, but he didn't call me.
Are you happy, though, since you've come back?
No, well, then there are a few things. I mean, the commitment that was made by the SG was to the whole public. We were saying, please, there are people who appeared before the Zondo Commission and other commissions, and they had been asked to go to the Integrity Commission of the ANC, and they didn't do that. And we said, why do you waste a crisis? Why don't you then call them to a disciplinary committee and say you defied a decision of the National Executive Committee to come and explain why you are in the Zondo Commission? And we got the SG to actually announce to the public, as I was coming back, he said no one who was implicated and has not appeared before the TC would be allowed to be on the list. So we were saying just a gesture of seriousness about your distaste for corruption would be to say, until people who have been accused of corruption by the commissions should not be on the list until their names have been cleared. It's a straightforward thing. Well, unfortunately, am I happy? There are people who still stayed behind. Quite a few had left.
Yeah. Are you happy with the renewal agenda of the ANC?
The renewal agenda of the ANC is experiencing a lot of difficulties because there are things that could be done. I mean, if you ask me, what's the renewal about? You should be able to say the renewal will require step number 1, remove all the crazy people who are doing these things. Number 2, do this and that. You can't renew an organization with some of the people you know need to be renewed out of the organization, so to say. So, but, you know, the Veterans League and other parts of the organization, you'd be amazed at the amount of time and some of their own resources, which are limited, they spend to get the organization to ensure that this renewal has meaning. It hasn't really had any traction up to date. That's the short answer.
And given that it hasn't had much traction, do you think this ANC is even capable of coming back? Because it's gotten a bruising from the last elections, and one would argue if that traction is as slow as you describe it, there's no way it's going to get back on its feet anytime soon.
Well, I'm likely to offend people here. I think it's going to be very difficult unless we really hasten with the renewal things. I was interested to hear that some suggestions, I guess from the branch of one of your callers, showing or suggesting how this should be done. I get the impression that that's not being taken up. It would be interesting what he wanted done and what people are not doing. But I might offend here. I really hope the ANC renews itself, gets rid of the people who are corrupt. Because honestly, on the opposition side, as far as the other parties are concerned, I don't see any party, respectfully, that has the ability to run this country. We're not running it well, but I don't see how anybody else at the present moment would do it better.
Sipho, you calling us from MDN in Soweto. Good morning.
Morning, Clement. How's it?
Shop, man. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Mavuso.
Yibo.
So I've got just a simple question. It dates back before the ANC got into power. Was the ANC ready to govern, say? Was the ANC ready to govern this country? Did it have the right economic policies to run this country? Because why I'm asking those questions today, ANC has got, they had economic policies before, your RDP, your KIE, your ASGISA, now we have the MDG. But after 30 years, our people are still living in squalor. Majority of our people, our children today are still dying from the flood. People they can't even go to school because there are no bridges, no proper schooling, people dying in pit latrines and stuff like that. So, was the ANC ready to govern? Say, that's my question. Thanks, Clement.
Thank you so much, Sipho. I do remember there was a document the ANC presented titled "Ready to Govern."
Yes, in terms of the broader parameters that would define an ability, a readiness to govern, I think that was in place. The failure has been in executing this. CODESA, which is now being, I think the listeners, your listeners understand CODESA. The agreements that were made there were actually good enough to see us not only get political freedom, but eventually the economic improvement and the land and all of that. It is subsequent administrations, but in particular, when we just decided to bring into the government people who had no competence, but not just no competence, but a lot who were very corrupt. Before 1994, you joined the ANC and it was risky to do that because you had an objective. After 1994, you're in government. Coming to the ANC, I think we needed to be stricter in our auditing of membership and so on. But I'm not blaming it on people who came afterwards. Yeah. I am saying, yes, I agree, I will not defend anything. It's shameful that 30 years on, the situation of the economic situation of our people is what it is. It's never done overnight. No, in no country has it happened like that, but we could and should have done better than that.
So maybe the organization itself was ready to govern, but the people that it's put up were not so ready.
Yes, the governance, I think it's very important. You won't be liberated. Services are not delivered by things that are written down. They're delivered by people. And the people who were elected, chosen, by and large, or shall I say, many of them, just should not have been in positions in which they were placed. That's why we are where we are now.
Yeah. Tafara says, Clement, what a great man in Dr. Msimang. You're hosting there, Clement. Thank you to Mr. Fix-It, sir, for your humility and contribution in and out of government. I wish you'd served in much higher capacities, and I can only wish there are more patriots in our world that will, in our country, that will serve this country well. That's a message from Tafara Farai. Why do they call you Mr. Fix-It?
Well, I should accept that with humility because I always worked with many people. But I was the CEO of a number of state organizations, SA Tourism, the national parks and so on. My model, my idea was to fix what was not working and move on to something else. We had challenges of transformation mostly, and so we had to put in place a structure that had competence, that had budgets and implemented them. And to a very large extent, most of these things did succeed.
Yeah.
Even Home Affairs, I want
mean, you
to
were
say.
DG there, and there was a lot of transformation.
We got a report from Princeton University that said the changes that had been made there were irreversible. I think they didn't quite know.
Yeah. Look at where we are now. Some people are still trying to fix that. Here's some WhatsApp voice notes.
Morning. Thanks, Clement, for bringing the stalwart. I'm so impressed to hear from him, and he's one of the leaders that resonate with my principles as a person that is principled, let alone the love for the grandchildren. May he live forever for us and guide the ANC and the society. Thank you. Fully.
Thank you very much. Another person wants to know, what do you do for fun?
I wish the challenges that are facing the country could be described as fun. I do spend a fair bit of time with colleagues. I'm avid follower, lover of conservation. I worked for national parks at a certain time, and that's one institution that just helped me understand the relationship of men, women, of humanity with nature. The things that are in this country brought by people who thought they were civilized turn out to be not so good. Alien species of trees, which in a country that has not enough water. Ignorance of the relationship between plants and human beings and all of that. We go to pharmacies and get medicines there. Our people always had drugs and herbs, serious herbs to heal their own. I had boils, if you can give me a chance, when I was a teenager. I used to have boils on my thing. And believe you me, somebody showed a datura leaf, ijoy in Zulu. And they took that, heated it, put it on where the boil was, and it was sucked completely out of existence forever. And as you know, usually a boil, they deal with it with modern medicines here, and it shoots up somewhere else, usually even in awkward places. But that was the end. But that was a natural thing. It's a weed, and somebody knew that it's used like that. So I really would like us to get closer to nature and understand it.
You are still a Pirates fan?
Yes, no, never mind the difficulties. Yes, I am.
I mean, difficulties. Have you heard of Kaiser Chiefs? That's difficulties. So we are much better, at a much better place.
No, I do agree. You don't abandon, just like the ANC.
Except you did for a few hours and came back.
I learned my lessons.
Mr. Msimang, thank you so much for coming through. This was great. I really appreciate you coming through, and we really appreciate your contribution in fighting for this democracy that we enjoy today. We didn't have to make a choice between spending time with our families or going on to exile. We were born and we found things that almost work, and we were given opportunities you guys never had. So your contribution is appreciated.
Thank you very much for your kind words, but I would also like to thank the callers. They've had some very nice things. I'll strive to live up to their rating of me, but it's kind. Thanks for the opportunity. And right on to 702 listeners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a minute before 11. Go!